As the modern Kingdom of Saudi Arabia celebrates its 90th birthday, some seismic geopolitical shifts seem to be taking place in the region of the Middle East. We're going to talk about some of the goings-on in the Middle East with, once again, returning for the third time on Jimmy at the Crossroads, the official spokesperson for the Saudi Arabian Embassy in Washington, D.C., Fahad Nazer. Jimmy at the Crossroads with yours truly, Jimmy Sengenberger, starts right now.
Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics, great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix, I said. Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics, great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. Come on, Jimmy, what you got?
Hello, my friends, and welcome to another edition of Jimmy at the Crossroads. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, once again coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner today on the one web show and podcast that I know of where the host actually plays harmonica in his own theme song. So good to be with you today on this very program. If you have not done so already, please do subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads. Follow me on Twitter at Sang Center. That's Sang with an E, not an A, Center on Twitter. And of course, be sure to follow our friends at the Washington Examiner, WashingtonExaminer.com. All sorts of great content there for you to check out. Today, I am very pleased to dive in once again, and we've been talking about Middle East and what's happening in the region quite a bit here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, because it really is important. There are a lot of transformational things that are happening, and it's something that we should all be encouraged about. And that's why I'm very pleased to be joined for the third time here on Jimmy at the Crossroads by the official spokesperson for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which has just celebrated its 90th birthday. Fahad Nazer rejoins us on the show. Sir, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much for having me on a third time, Jimmy, and your harmonica playing is impressive indeed.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoyed that. It's fun, and I like spicing things up a little bit, especially in these very tense times across the globe. So I want to start by talking a little bit about the Saudi National Day that just took place a few weeks ago on the 23rd of September. It was the 90th anniversary since the founding of the modern Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Tell us what your thinking is at this point in time, given this milestone.
Sure. So Saudi National Day, much like the 4th of July here in the United States, is a day to celebrate the founding of Saudi Arabia. It is a day to reflect on all that has been accomplished over the past 90 years in the kingdom. It's also a day to reflect on the contributions of Saudis in general. But I think us Saudis, it's also a day for us, each and every one of us, to kind of reflect on our own contributions. What have we done to further advance the development of our country? And obviously this year, it was a little different than past years because of COVID, this pandemic that has impacted every single country in the world. So the celebrations were, a bit more low-key than past years, but it was still a great day to celebrate and commemorate the founding of the country. And hopefully next year it'll be, back to normal.
From your standpoint as the official spokesperson for your country, for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, why should Americans care about this 90th year?
Well, as it happens, this past February 15th marked the 75th anniversary of the historic meeting between the late King Abdulaziz Al Saud, who was the founder of modern-day Saudi Arabia, and the late President Franklin Delano Roosevelt aboard the USS Quincy in the Suez Canal. And since that time, in those 75 years, the relationship has continued to grow and to broaden and to deepen on multiple levels. I think in many ways it is multidimensional. There's a political component, there's an economic component, there's a military component to the relationship, and there's also a people-to-people component. So when people talk about Saudi-U.S. relations now, unfortunately, I think it is often forgotten that, for one thing, our troops, Saudi and American troops, have fought not one, but two wars together. We did it once. The first time was back in 1990, 1991, when we expelled Saddam Hussein's troops from Kuwait. We did it more recently in 2014, 2015, when again our troops fought side by side to expel the terrorist group known as ISIS from Iraq and Syria. So this is just one example of how important this relationship has been. I would argue certainly for the national security interests for the of Saudi Arabia, but also multiple presidents and administrations have also found it to be important to the national security interest of the United States. So there's multiple reasons why it has endured for as long as it has, and we certainly look forward to it continuing well into the future.
Of course, as you well know, Fahad Nazer from the Saudi embassy, the American people are very attuned to human rights issues and to the freedom of women, whether it's economic freedom, political freedom, social freedom, what have you. And one thing that I have taken notice of in the past couple of years is that we have seen a noticeable expansion in the freedom of women in your country as far as mobility, as far as economic opportunity. For the first time in the history of the kingdom, you now have a woman who's an ambassador to the United States is a woman for the first time, which is pretty historic. Talk to us about some of those milestones that have been undertaken over the past couple of years. And I know that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has been a big advocate of many of these reforms with his Vision 2030 plan agenda.
Right. So the Vision 2030 plan is a broad package of economic and social reforms that seeks to transform our economy and to lessen our dependence on oil and oil revenues. To reduce, also it seeks to reduce the size of the public sector and to empower the private sector to become the engine of the economy. And there are many different elements and components to the vision, but what is at front and center of it, and one of the keys to its success, is the empowerment of women. So as you said, everything you said is absolutely correct. Our leadership has made it very clear that the future of the kingdom in many ways depends on making sure that women are empowered to succeed both at the workplace and at home. So we have passed dozens of new regulations to make sure that women are indeed mobile, that they can have every opportunity and every tool at their disposal to excel at school. We've opened up various academic disciplines for them so that they can pursue whatever career they want. They've always played a part in the private sector as businesswomen, but that sphere has continued to broaden. So, as you said, we now have a female ambassador here who, frankly, is one of our best spokespersons that we have. And she's not the only one. I think, just in the past couple of months, 2 more female ambassadors have been appointed. We have women who are heads of major companies in the kingdom. The head of the stock exchange is a woman, and this is the way forward. As I said, I think empowering women is one of the keys to the success of the kingdom. Well over 50% of our population is women. More than 50% of college students are women. So this is, we're all in agreement here. When women succeed, the kingdom overall does better, and so we're making sure that they have every tool they need to succeed.
Yeah, and I certainly hope, and I know so many Americans hope that this trend continues. It is truly encouraging to see at this point in the world history to see this sort of advancement. So I'm pleased by that. Fahad Nazer, again, official spokesperson for the Saudi Arabian embassy in Washington, D.C. Something else that has been going on in terms of, I think, dramatic and significant changes in geopolitics has been what we're seeing in the Middle East as far as Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates both signing on to the Abraham Accords, a peace agreement between Israel and those two countries, with possibly other Gulf Arab states to join on to the Arab Accords in coming months and years. I'm curious the official reaction to this news and these developments from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, sir.
Right. So the kingdom's position on the Israeli-Palestinian dispute has been consistent for many years. We can go back to the late 80s, in fact, but certainly we have been we've made our position very clear publicly in 2002 when then the late King Abdullah presented what became known as the Arab Peace Initiative at the Arab Summit in Beirut. This was back in 2002. And this initiative was endorsed by all 22 members of what is known as the Arab League. And basically what it says is it offers Israel normalizations with all of these countries. They all signed on to it in return for a full, comprehensive, and just peace between Israel and the Palestinians based on a two-state solution. So that offer is still on the table. We feel that once that is done, certainly Saudi Arabia and the rest of the members of the Arab League will move forward. Having said that, any moves in the direction of reducing or curtailing unilateral moves like annexation of territory is a good thing. So we're hopeful. Our offer is still on the table, and so basically it is up to the Israelis to take that offer.
But as far as the UAE and Bahrain opening up relations formally with the state of Israel, what do you make of that development? Because obviously there's a goal in mind of achieving peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians, but this is something that is notable, certainly to us here in the United States, with President Trump helping to broker that.
Right. So as I said, I think any initiatives or agreements that move us closer to reducing tensions in the region, to making sure that all of these the tensions that have continued for decades, frankly, are reduced, are a good thing. Ultimately, the kingdom does believe very strongly that the core issue of that dispute, that is the dispute between Israelis and Palestinians, has to be resolved for the overall region to enjoy any semblance of peace or prosperity. Because you have to remember, this issue, this dispute is one of the oldest, the longest standing in the world. It has been the source of not only a lot of tension, but a lot of heartache and even suffering, certainly for the Palestinians over the years. Not to mention the fact that terrorist groups and militant groups, terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS and Hezbollah and others, have been paying lip service to this dispute for decades. They have used it to recruit followers and to wreak havoc across the region. So the sooner we resolve it, the sooner we defang them, and so it'll be a win on two fronts. You're resolving one dispute, but you're also taking a huge step towards vanquishing and defeating these terrorist groups once and for all.
And a final question on this topic before we shift gears to the broader relationship between Saudi Arabia and the United States, Fahad Nazer. There are conversations going on that indicate perhaps other Arab nations may sign on to the Abraham Accords. Is there anything that could potentially bring Saudi Arabia to the table in this regard?
Yes, I mean, like I said, I think that once a just and comprehensive peace between Israel and the Palestinians is reached, Saudi Arabia has made its position very clear that we will definitely move forward, and we will bring along with us, potentially 20 other countries. These are the same member countries that signed on to the Arab initiative way back in 2002. That offer is still on the table. Mm-hmm. So, it is up to the Israelis and the Palestinians to go back to the negotiating table. And once that that core issue, that core dispute is resolved, there's really no reason for the other countries in the region, including Saudi Arabia, not to have normalized relations with Israel as well.
Fahad Nazer, one thing that has brought a lot of these countries to the table, it seems, or having discussions and some of the buildup of relations with the UAE and Bahrain, for example, is concern over Iran. You and I have talked about this troublemaker in the region and what Iran has done in so many different capacities, supporting terrorist organizations, what we've seen in Yemen, which we'll get to in a moment, and so forth. But that is one thing that I think has really helped to give the United States and Arab Gulf states in the region of the Middle East a good understanding of what it takes in order to come together and unite behind defeating or addressing the concerns regarding a common enemy in Iran. Speak to us a little bit about where you see things as being at right now with regards to the Iranian regime.
Right. So Saudi Arabia and the United States, I think, are in complete alignment when it comes to the dire and very real threat that Iran represents to the security of not just Saudi Arabia or the region, but really the international order as we know it. Iran has sought to destabilize the entire Middle East and to provoke conflict for the past 40 years. You've already mentioned a couple of examples, but really it is not an exaggeration to say that Iran has violated every norm, every law, every convention of the international community going back to 40 years. It has supported militant and terrorist groups beginning in Lebanon. It has continued to do it in Iraq. It is trying to do it in Yemen as well. And it is not a coincidence. It's not for without good cause that Iran has found itself to be the international pariah that it has. It's become the subject of multiple sanctions by the international community, by the European Union, by the United States, by its neighbors, because of these destructive behaviors and actions and policies that, again, have extended and continued for over the past 40 years. Again, people think of all the destructive attacks and the terrorist attacks that it has sponsored in Lebanon and Iraq and other places. But they seem to forget that Iran even tried to assassinate the Saudi ambassador right here in Washington some 10 years ago or so. It has just last year, there was a huge, potentially catastrophic terrorist operation planned by Iranian agents in the heart of Europe, in Paris, that actually extended well beyond France's borders. I think that it involved Germany and the Netherlands as well. So this behavior simply has to stop. We are fully supportive of the United States maximum pressure policy. We think, and I think unfortunately history has proven that Iran does not respond to incentives. It only responds to sanctions.
Right.
And so we're fully supportive. We're in complete alignment with the United States when it comes to Iran and the threat that it poses.
Sure. And one thing, of course, that the Trump administration did right in the beginning was withdraw the United States from the Iranian nuclear deal, recognizing that it was a foolhardy deal, as I think Gulf Arab states understand that. Israel understands that. I mean, across the board, there is a recognition about the threat that Iran poses in the region and around the world. That is most certainly for sure. In terms of the relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia at this point in time, Fahad Nazer, one thing that's been so striking to me is not just that it goes back now 75 plus years since Franklin Delano Roosevelt had his first meeting with the King of Saudi Arabia, but right now we are seeing this alignment in a number of different areas in terms of regional security and Iran and some other issues. And one of those issues is Yemen. We've talked a little bit about the civil war in Yemen, which seems that there's sort of a proxy war going on where Iran is engaging there and Saudi Arabia has responded, and we have the United States that has been providing support in countering the regime of Iran in Yemen. Talk to us a little bit about what's going on there, especially vis-a-vis the ceasefire from several months ago, and if that has been ongoing, and what's the current state of affairs there?
Right. So Saudi Arabia is really doing everything it can to restore peace, stability in Yemen. As you know, Saudi Arabia did not start this conflict that has been going in Yemen for the past 5 years. It was not a war that we wanted. It was a war of necessity. It was not a war of choice. And we entered the conflict to support the internationally recognized government of Yemen, which which gave us or asked formally for assistance from us. Our actions and involvement in Yemen has the endorsement of the international community in the form of United Nations Security Council resolution that was passed in, I believe, May of 2015, that passed almost unanimously. Yemen is right along our border. It was the prospect of not one, but three militant groups having free reign in Yemen simply was not one that we could accept. And when I speak about three, I'm obviously speaking about this, again, militant Iranian-backed group known as the Houthis that try to impose its will on Yemen, that took over arms and tried to take over the internationally recognized government of Yemen. That's essentially what started this conflict. In addition to that, you have Al-Qaeda has had a presence in Yemen over years. ISIS has had a presence in Yemen for many years. So that the prospect of all these three militant, radical, violent terrorist groups wreaking havoc, potentially destroying Yemen, turning it into a safe haven for terrorists, and lobbing hundreds of missiles and crossing the border into Saudi Arabia was simply not one that we accepted. So we are doing everything we can to restore peace there. We are backing the United Nations efforts at a settled, negotiated political resolution. We're fully supportive of that. We are also the biggest provider of humanitarian aid to Yemen. If you go back over the past 5 years, our total aid amounts to $17 billion, and that's billion with a B. That has been in the form of support to schools and internally displaced people, support to electrical generators and electrical companies. It has also been support to the central bank. So we are doing, as far as we can, everything we can to restore peace and stability in Yemen.
One thing that the American left has brought up is they say President Donald Trump is supporting Saudi Arabia and engaging in, and this is a strong word they use, in a genocide in Yemen. How do you respond to that claim?
No, I say that the violence in Yemen was happening months before our involvement in 2015. So again, this conflict began when this militant Iranian-backed militia took up arms against the internationally recognized government of Yemen. It will end when that same group lays down its weapons, stops thinking that it can impose its will on the rest of Yemen, stop thinking that it can threaten Saudi Arabia's security as well, and go back to the negotiating table and try to put its own interests and Iran's interest aside and actually think of the well-being of the people of Yemen, who have suffered a great deal because of the Houthis, and they're essentially doing Iran's bidding there, which is essentially the same model that Iran built in Lebanon with Hezbollah. It is trying to replicate in Yemen, and that is simply not acceptable to us, and it's not really acceptable to most countries around the world.
No, it's pretty clear. The Houthis are a proxy for Iran in Yemen.
They certainly are. I mean, they're certainly not acting as if they have any regard for the well-being or the security of Yemen or Yemenis. They are defenders of Iran, and Iran certainly seems to be one of their very, very few supporters around the world. It has provided them with the advisors and expertise and technology, including missile technology, that they have lobbed, not just and used in Yemen, but they have lobbed hundreds of missiles inside Saudi Arabia. We have shared that information. We have been very forthcoming and very transparent. And we know for a fact, again, some of our U.S. and American counterparts have come and inspected these parts, and there's no doubt that these are Yemeni weapons and Yemeni technology.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Well,
Iranian
Iranian, yeah.
weapons and Iranian
Well,
technologies, right?
it's abundantly clear to me that what Iran's doing in providing these weapons and so forth is because they have their own objectives that are being advanced by the Houthis. I mean, that's pretty clear based on abundant evidence. And Iran doesn't do something unless it has particular interests in mind anywhere that Iran is involved. Again, Fahad Nazer, our guest. Just a couple quick final questions for you, spokesperson for the Saudi Arabian embassy in Washington, D.C. Real quickly on the Yemeni question, what do you think is the likelihood for lasting peace to be achieved there? And any thoughts on how much more time it might take for this violent incursion?
Right. So we are certainly hopeful that the efforts of the United Nations envoy for Yemen, Mr. Martin Griffith, will bear fruit. We are doing everything we can. We're supportive of his efforts. We have also brokered an agreement between the central government and what is known as the Southern Transitional Council in the south to make sure that that part of the conflict is resolved. That was known, actually, it was an agreement that was signed in and agreed to in Riyadh, and it's known as the Riyadh Agreement. So we are doing everything we can, and we are hopeful. I think ultimately a political resolution is what is needed. And again, as I said at the outset, this is a conflict that was begun by the Houthis. It will end when the Houthis put their own interests aside, put Iran's interests aside, and put the interests of the Yemeni people at the top of their priorities. And hopefully, and that will definitely, that is what is needed. And hopefully, they'll come to that realization sooner rather than later.
Now, of course, we are in the month of October, and it is stunning to think about how long this pandemic of COVID-19 has been lasting, what it has done to the globe. What has Saudi Arabia been doing to address this pandemic vis-a-vis Yemen, but particularly in your own country? And where do things stand from your vantage point on the pandemic?
Right. So I think that Saudi Arabia acted very quickly and very decisively. We had, information. And I came to a conclusion, I think, very quickly that this pandemic would be unlike anything we had seen in many, many years. So we acted very quickly. We closed our schools. We suspended international travel. We even suspended visits to our holy sites in Mecca and Medina, all in the hope that the disease does not spread. I think we have been largely successful. Obviously, we've had certain cases, but we've had one of the world's lowest mortality rates due to COVID, and we're very thankful for that. The number of cases in general right now is on the decline. It's certainly fairly low compared to other countries. We're slowly beginning to open up the country. I think by the end of the year, maybe hopefully by the beginning of next year, things will not be completely back to normal, but I think we'll be well on our way. At the same time, I think we're looking beyond just containing the disease in the kingdom. This year, we are actually the president of the G20 group, and in our capacity as president, we convened a virtual summit back in March that brought the leaders of the member groups to make sure that the international community focuses its efforts on trying to address what is a very real threat to public health globally, but also to address the economic impact of this pandemic that it's had. Obviously, it has impacted every country and every economy in the world, including Saudi Arabia. Mm-hmm. And the G20, I think, has been very good in that regard. Mm-hmm. For its part, Saudi Arabia has donated and committed $500 million towards vaccine and therapeutics research and support to various health organizations working on trying to get us over the hump. So, I think we're doing everything we can, both internally to contain the disease, but also globally to try to contain it from spreading around the world as well.
And finally, speaking of economics, earlier at the beginning of our conversation with you, Fahad Nazer, again, official spokesperson for the Saudi Arabian embassy in Washington, D.C., you mentioned the words empower the private sector. Now, I'm a free market guy. I believe that we should have across the globe, certainly in my country, the United States, limited government, a free market. We should unleash the private sector, enable that kind of innovation, the unlimited potential of each and every individual to really create something vibrant and prosperous for all people. And I'm curious if you could expand on that just a little bit. I know that one of the big agenda items of President Trump in the Middle East has been to improve the economic state of affairs, to help encourage more of this opening up of the private sector. So give us just an eye for a moment into the region and particularly into Saudi Arabia and what the kingdom is doing to empower the private sector and maybe scale back some of its government-run industries and so forth.
Right. So, I mean, this is ultimately what Vision 2030 is all about. It is seeking, its ultimate goal is to reduce our dependence on the energy sector and to reduce our dependence on oil revenues, to diversify our economy. Our leadership has spoken frankly about the fact that because of our focus on the energy sector over the years, that some of the other sectors of the economy have not been developed to their full potential. So we're looking at all our sectors now. We think that as part of the vision, we are essentially building some sectors from the ground up. So the two that come to mind, maybe more than any others, are tourism and entertainment. Years ago, you wouldn't think that Saudi Arabia would be a tourism destination, but that is no longer the case. We started issuing a tourist visa for the first time this year, knowing that the kingdom does have a lot to offer in terms of ancient historic sites comparable to what you have in Egypt and Jordan and other countries in the region. We have natural wonders. We have pristine beaches that frankly rival any beaches anywhere in the world. We have mountains. We have diving. We have, perhaps I'm a little biased, but Saudis by nature are very warm, welcoming people. The Americans that I know who've been to the kingdom have come back, full of praise for how welcoming everybody was. And so we started doing that. We started issuing this tourist visa for the first time earlier this year when we had thousands of people come in. Unfortunately, COVID obviously has slowed things down, but we are fully committed to diversifying our economy. We are looking to build the first smart city from the ground up, which is what we call NEOM. We have all sorts of initiatives, but as I probably mentioned last time, we have a predominantly young, well-educated, well-connected population. But we're also looking for others to come and help us. We have always been welcoming of American companies to come and to help with our developments. American companies have been there from the beginning when Saudi Arabia was first founded and started developing. So American companies were there to help us in that early stage. And we are very much looking forward to continuing that relationship and for American companies to come and to use their know-how and to help us develop and as we embark on this very exciting new stage in our development process.
Well, and I have to say that there are some positive developments with the Vision 2030 agenda moving forward. I'm always encouraged when more human liberty, economic, political, and social expands on the global stage, and so certainly lots of things to be encouraged by in that regard. Fahad Nazer, again, official spokesperson for the Saudi Arabian embassy in Washington, D.C. You've been so generous with your time today. I really appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jimmy. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. Once again, joining us for the third time here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, Fahad Nazer from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia Embassy in Washington, D.C. That is it for us today here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. I do want to say it is so important that we all pay attention to the changes and transformations and things that are happening in the region and understand when it comes to the Middle East, the complexities of the geopolitical dynamics there as well. Because as with anything in geopolitics, It is not nearly as simple as meets the eye. A lot of times politicians will try to oversimplify, and they will be wrong to do so. And that's why we get into depth and actually talk about these dynamics and these issues here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Thanks so much for joining us today. Thanks to Nathan Mattus for producing, to Fahad Nazer for joining us on the show, and of course, to the Washington Examiner, our partners here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, and to you for watching, subscribing, listening, sharing, all those good things. Please do share the content. We appreciate it so very much. Thank you for your support. We will be back tomorrow, same time, same place, more engaging, intelligent talk, same style. For now, have a great day, and may God bless America.